Hi, good afternoon. These notes are on area and missing dimensions, and this should be page 98 in our notebook. So at the very top, we have a few things that we need to make sure that we understand. That area is the amount of space inside of a closed figure, and you must memorize these formulas below. And when we're working with these formulas, we're going to round to the nearest tenth when necessary. Sometimes we'll just do the hundredths place if it goes to the hundredths easily. So the first formula we're going to talk about is a square. So a square, all the sides are the same. So we know we're going to do side times side, and to represent that, we're going to say side squared. And S equals your side length. Then we have a rectangle, which we're going to use L times W, which stands for length times width. The next shape we're going to talk about is a parallelogram, and parallelogram is base times height. But here's what must be true about your base and your height. So B is base, H is height. Base and height must be perpendicular to one another, and perpendicular means it forms a 90-degree angle. All right, triangles are just a parallelogram cut in half. So a triangle is base times height divided by 2. And again, make sure that your base and height, so your base and height must be perpendicular to each other. And then our last shape is called a trapezoid. And the trapezoid, we're going to use this funky looking formula. So B1, which stands for base 1, plus base 2, all of that times the height divided by 2. So B1 means base 1, B2 means base 2, and it does not mean B squared. This just means it's the second base. And then your bases are parallel to each other, and your base and height are perpendicular, just the same as above on these other three. Okay, so those are all the formulas that you need to make sure that you know of the shapes given. So now what we're going to do is we're going to practice doing some problems together. So this first shape is a square, and its side lengths are 6 yards and 6 yards. So 6 times 6, or 6 squared, and that gives me 36 yards squared. Please don't forget to put your units and to put squared to represent that it is area. All right, this square has a length of 9.7, so 9.7 squared, and 9.7 squared is 94.09, and that's centimeters squared. All right, the third square is 9.75 meters long, so we're just going to do 9.75, excuse me, squared, because that's the side length, and that goes into the formula right here. And 9.75 squared is 95.06 something something, so we're going to round to 0.1. And that gives me meters squared. So those are all the areas of the square. Now we're going to move on to rectangle. And rectangle is length times width. So length times width, 9.1 times 8.5. And that product is 77.35 feet squared. If you want to round that to 77.4, that's fine. All right, a length of 42.5 times 37.2. And the product there is 1,581, and then inches squared to represent my units and my area. All right, and then our third one is 13.5 times 8.1, because it's length times width. And then that will give me a product of 109.35. They don't give us units, so we're going to write the word units squared. Okay. All right. Our next shape is a parallelogram. So parallelogram is base times height. Your base and height must be perpendicular. So the two dimensions that are perpendicular are right here and right here because they form a 90-degree angle. So that means that we're not going to use the 9 feet because that's the slanted side. We would use the 9 feet if we were doing perimeter, but we're not doing perimeter, we're doing area, and area is base times height. So we're going to do 5 times 6, and 5 times 6 is 30 feet squared. All right. The next one, they already tell us our base and height, so we don't have to find it. So it's just 17 times 14. And 17 times 14 gives me 238 yards squared. All right. And then our third shape is still a parallelogram. And again, we have to use the sides that are perpendicular to each other. So the 7 is slanted, so we know we can't be using that. But we know that 13 and 6, because the 6 technically is right here as well. And that makes 90 degrees with 13. So we're going to use this side length of 6. So 13 times 6. And that gives me 78 inches squared. Again, it has to be perpendicular to the base, so that's why we chose the 13 and 6. All right, moving on to triangles. Triangles is base times height divided by 2. So again, base and height must be perpendicular to each other, and then we're just going to cut it in half. So looking at this triangle, the two dimensions that are perpendicular are the 9 and the 7, so we're not going to use the 11. So let's cross him out. So 9 times 7, and a lot of kids stop there and they forget to divide by 2. So make sure you put divided by 2 or multiply times a half. And 9 times 7 is 63, and 63 divided by 2 is 31.5 yards squared. All right, our next problem is a base triangle, a triangle with a base of 36 and a height of 7. So 36 times 7, base times height, divide by 2, and that gives me 126 millimeters squared. All right, our third triangle has a 5 by 7 by 12. The 12 is the diagonal length, which is also called the hypotenuse on a right triangle. So the two sides that we're going to use are 5 and 7.
If you are on campus, please report to the front office. Grace Gardner Spikes, if you are on campus, please report to the front office.
So 5 and 7 are perpendicular to each other, so those are the base and height that we're going to use. So 5 times 7 divided by 32, and that gives me 17.5 units squared. All right, so that's triangles. All right, and then our last shapes that we're going to deal with are trapezoids. So with trapezoids, your bases, base 1 plus base 2, your bases must be parallel to each other. So for example, 23 and 15 are your bases, and then your height must be perpendicular, so we're going to use the 6. So we don't need the 7.
Route 5 has arrived and is loading in the bus lot. Again, Route 5 has arrived and is loading in the bus lot. Thank you.
So 23 plus 15 is my base 1 plus my base 2 times my height of 6. All of that divided by 2. Once I type that into my calculator, I get 114 centimeters squared. Because you have to add 23 plus 15 and you get 36 or 38. 38 times 6 and you get 228, and then 228 divided by 2 and I get 114. All right, here I've got base 1, base 2, and my height. So 36 plus 27, all of that times 7, and then divided by 2. So then when I put all that into my calculator, I get a final answer of 220.5 millimeters squared. All right, and then my last shape is a trapezoid. It looks like it's a rectangle with a triangle attached to it. So we're going to treat this as a trapezoid because I've got my base 1, my base 2, and my height. So 35 plus 47, all of that times 38, and then divide that by 2. And then once I put all that into my calculator, the final product that the final answer that I get is 1,558 yards squared. Okay, So those are all of the 5 shapes that we'll be practicing within the next day. We're going to add circles onto this tomorrow night, but for today, you're just going to be focusing on your squares, your rectangles, your parallelograms, triangles, and trapezoids. Let's go over here for one more thing. So what if there's missing dimensions? So if there's some missing dimensions, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to write the formula. And then step 2 is we're going to want to substitute the numbers in for the variables. And then step 3, we're going to want to solve for that missing variable. So for example, number 1, find the height of a parallelogram with an area of 12.42 meters squared and a base of 5.4. So what we're going to do is write the formula. So area equals base times height, because that's the formula for a parallelogram. And then what they've given us is area. So 12.42 goes in for A. Base is 5.4, so that's going to go in for B. And we don't know our H, so we put in H. Now that's a nice one-step equation. So what we're going to do is divide both sides by 5.4. Divide by 5.4. And then that gives me 2.3 equals my H. So my answer is 2.3 meters. Not squared, because 2.3 is not your area. 2.3 is your missing height. All right, number 2, the width of a rectangle with the area of 44.8 feet and a length of 8 feet. So area of a rectangle is length times width. What do they give us? They give us area, so let's fill that in. They give us a length, but they don't give us a width. And then it's a nice one-step equation, so now we're going to divide both sides by 8. And then I get 5.6 equals W, so 5.6 feet is my width. All right. And then my third problem is the height of a triangle find the height of a triangle that has an area of 48 and a base of 12. So area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. My area is 48. My base is 12. My height, I don't know, but then I'm going to divide by 2. Excuse me. All right, so we could do 2 things. We can simplify this and make this 6, because 12 divided by 2 is 6. Or we can multiply both sides by 2 to make this division of 2 go away. I want to do that just because I want to show that I'm undoing what's happening to the equation. So if I multiply times 2, then I divide by 2, really these cancel each other out. So this gives me 96 equals 12H. Divide both sides by 12. And 96 divided by 12 is 8. So my height is 8 centimeters. So that's how you solve geometry problems when the area is given and you have to work your way backwards to find the length or the height or the base or whatever they're asking for. All right, so down here are some problems for you to practice. You don't have to do these. These are just extra. But what you will be doing tonight for homework, excuse me, is there are some quiz reviews that you guys got in class. So please make sure that you have these sheets. You're only going to do the odds. So there are 3 little small sheets that you should have gotten. And if you were not here, you need to come to me first thing in the morning to get these sheets so that you can catch up during lunch.
Student Route 7 has arrived and is loading in the bus lot. Again, Route 7 has arrived and is loading in the bus lot. Thank you.
All right, so again, if you were able to come into class and get these papers, please make sure that you have these notes completed and that you do the odds for the quiz review. If you did not get these because you were in an elective class when they were making the early release announcement, you have to come see me in the morning. You're going to glue them in, and you have to come see me during lunch so you can get this, so you can get these papers going, because I cannot, we cannot spare a class time to play catch up. So please come see me early in the morning at 7 o'clock. After that, during lunchtime is when we will have a 25-minute class to play catch up, okay? All right, have a great afternoon. Stay safe in the weather, and I will talk to you guys later.